Note: in trying to collect evidence as to the Redrick evil spirits from the Kirk session records, I have been most kindly assisted by the Reverend Mr. Nakanichi, Minister of Redrick, and Mr. Nakanichi finds that only 2 parishes in Stalworthy, Kells, and Girthan have records containing the years of 1695 and 1696. The records of Rarick do not go so far back. They are therefore left to the pamphlet of 1696 by Telfair, which is an unusually businesslike statement, the names of attesting witnesses being added in the marginal notes. For phenomena singularly similar to those of Rarick, Obey, by Mr. H. J. Bell, may be consulted. Obey, Sampson, Low & Company, London, 1889, page 93. Notes. Introduction. Note A, p. 16. The Cyclical Society. The Cyclical Society, as far as the writer is aware, has not examined officially the old accounts of the phenomena which it investigates at present. The catalogue of the Society's library, however, proves that it does not lack the materials. Note B, page 30. Their speech is a kind of whistling. That the voices of spirits is a kind of whistling, twittering, or chirping is a very widely diffused and ancient belief. The ghosts of Homer twitter like bats. In New Caledonia, an English settler found that he could scare the natives from a piece of ground by whistling there at night. Mr. Samuel Wesley says, "I followed the noise into almost every room in the house, both day and night, with lights and without, and have sat alone for some time, and when I heard the noise, spoke to it to tell me what it was, but never heard any articulate voice, and only once or twice, or 3 feeble squeaks, a little louder than the chirping of a bird, and not like the noise of rats, which I have often heard." Memoirs of the Weasley Family, page 164. Professor Alexander mentioned the peculiar whistling sound at some manifestations in Rio de Janeiro as rather frequent. POC, no PRC, SPR 19, page 180. Here children were the mediums. How did they get the idea of the traditional whistle? See also the following note. Note C, page 40. Not long after the Spanish conquest of Peru, the phenomena alluded to here are said to have occurred in 1549. The evidence is a mere report by Cizia de Leon, who does not pretend to have been an eyewitness, but as Mr. Clements Markham, Sierra's editor, remarks, the phenomena are analogous to those of spiritualism. At the very least, we find a belief of this kind of a manifestation at a remote date and in an outlandish place. Cieso says, when the Adianto Belalcazar was governor of the province of Pampia, and the Gomez Hernandez was lieutenant in the town of Azurma, there was a chief in a village called Pirsa, about 4 leagues from the town, whose brother, a good-looking youth named Tamaraquanga, inspired by God, wished to go to the town of the Christians to receive baptism, but the devils did not wish that he should attain his desire, fearing that loss would seem secure, so they frightened this Tamaraquanga in such a sort that he was unable to do anything. God permitting it, the devils stationed themselves in a place where the chief alone could see them, in the shape of birds called auras. Finding himself so persecuted by the devils, he sent in great haste to the Christian living near, who came at once, and hearing what he wanted, signed him with the sign of the cross. But the devils then frightened him more than ever, appearing in hideous forms, which only were visible to him. The Christian only said stones falling from the sky, and heard whistling. The brother of one Juan Pacio, citizen of the same town, then holding office in the place of Gomez Hernandez, who had gone to Caramans, came from the Azurma with another man to visit the Indian chief. They say that Tamarascanda was much frightened and ill-treated by the devils, who carried him through the air from one place to another in presence of the Christians, he complaining, and the devil was whistling and shouting. Sometimes when the chief was sitting with a glass of liquor before him, the Christian saw the glass raise up in the air and put down empty, and a short time afterwards the wine was again poured into the cup from the air. Compare what in Batuta the old Arab traveler saw in the court of the king of Delhi. The matter is discussed in Colonel Yule's Marco Polo. This may suffice as a specimen of the manifestations they continued while the chief was on his way to church. while he was lifted into the air, and the Christians had to hold him down. In church the ghostly whistling was heard, and stones fell around, while the chief said that he saw a devil standing upside down, and himself was thrown into that unusual posture. The combination of convulsive movements with the other phenomena is that which we have already remarked in the case of Mr. H. and the grandson of William Morse. Cieza de Leon says that the chief was not troubled after his baptism. The illusions that the newly converted, so like those of the early Christian hermits, are described by Calloway in his Zulu tales. Note D, page 1. Priestley's explanation of the Upsworth disturbances is imposture to the servants by way of a practical joke. Coleridge, on the other hand, says that all these stories and I could produce 50 cases at least equally well authenticated, and as far as the veracity of the narrations, and the single act of their having seen and heard such sights and sounds, above the rational skepticism, are as much like one another as the symptoms of the same disease in different patients. It is a pity that Coleridge did not produce his 50 well authenticated samples. The similarity of the narratives elsewhere all over the world is exactly what makes them interesting. Coleridge goes on, "This indeed I take to the true and only solution, a contagious nervous disease, some acme or intense form of which is catalepsy." Southway's Weasley, Volume 1, page 14, Coleridge's note. If there be such contagious nervous disease, it is a very remarkable malady, and well worth examining. The Wesleys were not alarmed. They bantered the spirit, and they wished they could set him to work, and beyond the trembling of the children when Geoffrey was knocking during their sleep, there is no sign of morbid conditions. A neighboring clergyman, who was asked to pass the night in the house, saw and heard just what the others saw and heard. The hypothesis of a contagious nervous disease, in which every witness exhibits the same symptoms of illusion in all parts of the world, is a theory which needs a good deal of verification. Where material traces of the disturbances remain, it is absurd to speak of contagious hallucinations. We must fall back to the hypothesis of trickery, or must say that Southey. Such things may be preternatural, yet not miraculous. They may not be in the ordinary course of nature, yet imply no alteration of its laws. Any theory is more plausible than the idea of Mr. Wesley and Mr. Hooley, who were in a state bordering on catalepsy. Believers in hypnotism may think it possible that this, that, and the other persons, if they submitted themselves to hypnotic influences, might have the same hallucinations suggested to them. But there is no evidence in the Epsworth case, nor in the Rarick case, of any such matter. So far as we yet know, sensory hallucination of several persons together, who are not in a hypnotic state, is a rare phenomenon, and therefore not a probable explanation. PRC SPR 14, page 62. There is some evidence that epileptic patients suffer from the same illusions. For example, in the presence of a woman with a red cloak, and in delirium tremens, the horrors are usually similar. But that all the persons who enter a given household should be impressed by the same material illusions as of chairs and tables, and even beds, like Nancy Wesley's, floating around, is a theory more incredible than the hypothesis either of trickery or of abnormal occurrences. And the disturbances always cease on the arrival of a competent witness. Then it is not hard to say which theory we ought to choose. For imposture, see the next note. Note E, page 57. Children at seances. The phenomena discussed are most frequently connected with children, who may be regarded either as mediums or impostors, conscious or unconscious. In Proc. SPR 4, from 25 to 42, Professor Barrett gives a case of a little girl whom he knew. She had raps wherever she went, even when she was alone with the professor, who made her stand with her hands against the wall at the greatest stretch of her arms, with muscles and legs and arms all at tension. A brisk pattering of raps followed the professor's request, but he also mentioned a boy of juvenile piety who for 12 months deceived his father, a distinguished surgeon, and all his family, by pretending spiritual manifestations, which appeared at first sight inexplicable until the cunning trickery of the lad was discovered. The only difference between these cases is that an outsider discovered trickery in one instance and not the other. This is a very ticklish kind of certainty, and it is plain that children can do a great deal in the way of mere imposture. The state of any young Wesley who might have been caught out is inevitable. Verily, Mr. Weasley could not have spared for his crying. Note F, page 62. The pricking of witches. It is pretty certain that some of these unlucky old women were pricked in anesthetic areas. Note 8, page 8. The arrows that fly in the dark. The arrows of these ancient flint arrowheads, which Mr. Kirk later asserts to be too delicate for human artificers, in this matter Isabel Goward, the witch, confessed. As for elf arrows, the daredevil sharps with them with an ain hand, delivers them to elf boys, what whittles and digits them with a sharp thing like a prayer needle. But that was just in Elfland. I saw them whittling and lighting them. Isabel described the manner in which witnesses used artillery. We sprang them from the nails of our thumbs, and with these she and her friends shot and slew many men and women. The Confessions of Isabel Gowey are in the 3rd volume of Picturn's Scottish Criminal Trials. They contain little or nothing of the physical, always mere folklore, fairy tales, and charms derived from old Catholic liturgy. The poor women, having begun to fable, fabled with manifest enjoyment and considerable power. It seems from her account that each coven or assemble of witches had a maiden in it, and without our maiden we could do no great thing. On the other hand, extraordinary cases of an epileptic boy who was hurled about and beheld distant occurrences in trance may be read in Chambers' Domestic Annals of Scotland, Volume 3, page 449. Candles used to go out when this boy, a 3rd son of Lord Torpichen, was in the room. The date 1712 and the place, Midlothian, prevented anyone from being buried or bewitching him. The fast was proclaimed, the boy recovered and did good services in the navy. He is said to have been levitated frequently. Next note, page 11. Milk throw a hair tedder. Isabel Gowey confessed to stealing milk from a cow by magic. We'll plait the rope the wrong way in the devil's name, and we draw the tether between the cow's hind feet and betwixt her forward feet in the devil's name, and thereby take with us the cow's milk. Mr. Kirk, it was observed, did not connect the fairy kingdom with that of Satan, as some of his contemporaries were inclined to do. Note, page 19. The wraith is only envious fumes of a man, exhaled and congealed into various likenesses. What is this theory of men illiterate and unwary their observations, but von Hartmann's doctrine of the nerve force which issues from the body of these medium and then proceeds to set up fresh centers of force in all neighboring objects, while it still remains under the control of the medium's unconscious will. See Mr. Walter Leaf von Hartmann's Der Giesler Hypothesis Spiritismus, Pro SPR, 19, page 293. It is amusing to find a learned German coinciding scientific theory with ignorant and unwary Highland seers. Both regard the phantasms as manifestations of nerve force and extraneous fumes, and as neither souls nor counterfeit spirits. Note, page 23, Fairy Hills. The hypothesis that the fairies' belief may be traditional of the ancient race of dwelling subterranean homes is older than Mr. McRitchie or Sir Walter Scott. In his Scottish Scenery, 1803, Dr. Creary suggests that the germ of the fairy myth is the existence of dispossessed aboriginals dwelling in subterranean houses, in some places called pits houses, covered with artificial mounds. The lights seen near the mounds are light accidentally carried by the mound dwellers. Dr. Creary works out in some detail this marvelous absurd supposition, as the Quarterly Review calls it, volume 59, page 280. Page 30. Master Great Zarek, the Irish Stoker. Glanville, in Essays on Several Important Subjects, 1675, prints a letter from the Irish Bishop of Greatrex, the Stoker. He cured diseases by a sanative contagion. According to the bishop, Greatrex had an profession that he could do faith healing, and found that he could, but whether the virtues of some special power or by the people's fancy he knew not. He frequently failed, and his patients had relapses. See his own account of strange cures in a letter to Robert Boyle, London, 1666.